Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next in a series of 5-app webinars. This one's about building success and how Greystar, in particular, rapidly deployed learning. Delighted to be able to welcome Steve with us today. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Nice friendly picture. Steve, do you just want to describe who you are and what you do?
Yeah, Steve Thompson, as you can see, currently work for Greystar, responsibility for learning and talent across Europe, Asia Pacific and South America. Been with Greystar now for 4.5 years, but my background predominantly is financial services, banking and so on and so forth. But as for Greystar, a completely different organisation operating in the build-to-rent environment, looking at everything from investment, developing land, developing property, and then managing those properties.
What's the size of the organisation, Steve? How many heads are we talking about?
Globally, we're coming in around 27,000. For my little part of that world, started off with 600, and now I think we're tipping over just about 1,100 in terms of area of responsibility. So I guess it's good to point out that Greystar as an organisation is 25, 26 years old, but actually across Europe, Asia Pac and South America, we're about 6 years down that journey. So a relatively small organisation against our parent.
Okay, cool. Well, you say small. For some people, 600 or sorry, 1,100 people would still be quite a significant number.
Sure.
So, hi, Malisha. Nice to see you've joined us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Jacobs. I'm an independent consultant with an organisation called LLARN. It's my organisation, and I work in learning strategy, design, delivery, etc. And what I do is provide advice and guidance support around how to design and strategize good learning and development activity. I host these webinars with 5-app. Delighted to welcome you all here today. We are recording this session, and we might be using some of the audio in relation to podcasts as well. If you have any reasons to why that can't be included, then please do let us know, and we'll make a note of it to exclude those bits if you are speaking. We do use the chat vociferously. We will be polling and asking some questions, and we'll be using the chat for those questions as well. So please keep an eye open for the poll questions, and we've got one coming up in a moment, actually. So these are the primarily the three things we're going to do today. We're going to talk about check where your planning is around deploying learning. We'll look at through, well, what are some of the challenges that come from delivery, and then work out really, well, what next? So once you have done it, how do we then know that it's been successful? I'm going to do the first bit, talk about the planning stuff, because that's the theory bit, and that's the bit that people tend to ask me about, and we'll walk through with Steve the challenges and the what next elements. What I would like to know, first of all, is where are you within the process of deployment of learning? So are you at a planning stage? Are you just about to be deploying some learning? Are you doing some deployment of learning? Actually, you know, in the middle of it? Is it after? Have you done it and you're now looking at the success? Or is it an ongoing? Is it ongoing activity? I've had one response so far. Had a couple of responses. I'll leave the poll open and talk around it a little bit. Excuse me. So part of the issue is because we tend to deploy learning on a supply, on a demand basis. So someone says we need some learning about X, and so what we do is we put that out there. But there's some stuff realistically that I think we need to include, and they're what I call the 3 Ps. So what are the 3 Bs? So what are the principles around learning that you want to put together? So you need to ask yourselves, well, what do we need to build? And I think that's quite important, because a build time could be quite long, it could be relatively short. It could be material you've already got. It could be about assembly or reassembly. But understanding what you need to build to put out there from a learning perspective is important. You need to work out what you can't build and what you do need to buy in. So understanding where your gaps are and working out what those gaps, budget you have for those, and what they need to be costed is quite important as well. And thirdly, you need to work out what you need to borrow. And we don't do this enough in the process of deployment, particularly. What we tend to do is we go, well, it must be new. But actually, can you borrow something from somebody else? Is somebody elsewhere within the organization doing something which you want to pick up and use? And we've potentially got the opportunity to do that a lot more than maybe we have done in the past. As technology becomes easier, and just that idea of being able to reuse content and curating activity and content that we've got elsewhere rather than having to create new content, I think is quite important. But then we need to understand, well, the practices that sit behind it as well. So in terms of practices, well, what's the purpose of the this learning activity? And too often we don't get to the point of actually understanding what's the extent of it, what we're expecting to happen. Again, too often we get asked, can we deliver some training? But actually, what was the point of it? And then in terms of the purpose, if the purpose might be to make, I don't know, hybrid working more flexible, fine. So that's a really useful purpose. Then we can work out what the method needs to be underneath that. Again, what we do is we get stuck too often in going to the tool rather than actually looking at what the purpose is and then building the method that's appropriate. Lastly, the third part we need to do, what again we don't do when we're deploying, is understand, well, how are we going to measure it? How are we going to measure the effectiveness of something? So that's in terms of the planning phase. I think we need to do better at. Be clear about the purpose, not necessarily just the learning purpose, but the business purpose. Understand the methods, and so what channels are going to be appropriate, and within those methods, what you might build, what you might buy, what you might borrow. But more importantly, or most importantly, I think, is how we're going to measure it. And that will be measuring what's happened and also measuring what's taken place. Looking at the poll responses, it's the planning and the before stage. And I'd be interested in the chat if you could sort of like let us know where you are in terms of the planning stage or the before stage. Just let us know, okay, so how forward are you in this activity? Have you started building stuff? Have you started thinking about deploying stuff? Have you thought about how you're going to measure it? And has that been factored into the work that you do? I'm interested, Steve, understand the situation that you were in. How much planning were you able to do before you were able to deploy?
I think for us, the planning element was critical, and probably took longer than I anticipated. So our planning piece, I guess, was kicked off firstly and foremost with the need. So it wasn't necessarily a case of, right, Steve, you need to come in and you need to create X, Y, Z, roll this program out. When I joined Greystar, it was a really interesting time, and we were an incredibly high growth organization, and what comes along with that is pace, and also a tremendous amount of ambiguity. So when I landed, we didn't really have a training proposition, a training function. Any learning that was being administered or undertaken was very ad hoc. So my starting point was a needs analysis, an organizational needs analysis. The one thing that I was given a heads up on repeatedly was the low level of leadership and management capability and competence. And it didn't matter who I spoke to in the organization. That was a theme that was coming through. But when I look back now, it's understandable that capability was low, just against that backdrop, which is you've got a fairly new organization, very entrepreneurial spirit. But that rapid growth meant that you had a lot of specialists being promoted rapidly to very senior roles, but not necessarily having gone through the experience curve, if you like, having led people. So you had very senior people, like I say, in senior positions that not necessarily led a team, let alone a function. So, you know, our planning stage was kicked off with that, with the needs analysis. And, you know, what really stood out was, yes, the competency and capability, but more so around enabling our team members, our population, to actually access training for in its simplest form. So we didn't really have any course curricula. There was no real face-to-face courses going on. And what was the impact of that? Well, engagement was starting to wane. You know, attrition, you know, wasn't great in terms of the number of people that were starting to exit with the growth of the organisation. So that all came together in if you like, as part of the due diligence, the data gathering, to paint this picture that actually we needed something quite fundamental.
That's interesting, because in terms of purpose, it'd be really easy to hear we need a management development program, and you build a management development program. But actually, the purpose is much bigger than that, isn't it? The purpose was about designing support, engaging people, working towards, building a culture where people would work together, again reflecting that entrepreneurial spirit within the organization, and thinking how you can build that within learning and development as well. So because it's a great example of where I think purpose is a brilliant example of where we need to think as an engineer, and well, actually, how do we support the organization in doing this stuff, not just deliver courses, not just deliver content.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. You know, and it's that whole. I always look at it from a learning maturity perspective. You know, are we a travel agent? You know, do we have just people coming through our doors? It's quite an old example, isn't it? A travel agent. You know, people walking through the doors, picking up a brochure, saying this is where I want to go. I guess the old traditional course attendance mentality. Whereas, you know, we wanted to really start driving, you know, and fortunate for me, I guess, you know, the opportunity to come in and create something ground upwards, but to define, okay, what is it, you know, that we want to create? Yes, a self-directed learning culture. Yes, we want people to have access to the right training content and material, you know, at the right time, at point of need. So that all kind of wrapped up into this vision around almost creating the Greystar version of YouTube, and really tapping into the amount of experience and knowledge and talent that we have across the organization. So that was part of our planning and creating purpose, I guess.
It's that interesting, that connection with people, and building connections, working on the assumption that somebody somewhere in the organization knows the answer. I just need to connect the right people who know the answer to speak together.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Cool. Let's ask another question. So this approach of understanding the specific need, I'm interested as to how far do you think that this strategy it reflects the way that you're doing things? Is it completely the way that you take these things forward? Is it mostly? Is it partly? Or is it not at all? Is the situations and circumstances that you're working in, are they similar to Steve's, or are they different? If you can let us know in the on the poll. And I'd be interested to know in the chat if you can tell us why or why not as well. So are they similar or aren't they similar? From a personal perspective, I've worked in organizations, and that approach of having to work to the whole culture is really important. You know, working particularly in local government and central government, the cultural aspects really can help and support it, but they can also limit it. So yeah, I think, Claire, you've worked in government before, so you understand the culture challenge. I recognise Claire. Malisha should be interested in your experiences as well. I'll keep the poll up for a second or two longer. There we go, we'll end that poll. Okay, we've got the responses locked in from that one. Oh, come back. Oh, sorry, everybody. Apologies. Hate it when that happens. Where's my slide gone? I do apologise. I've lost my presenter view. I can't see what my next slides are. There it is. There it is. Okay. So, I'm interested, Steve. The nature of delivery. Really interested in. So, what were your key challenges? Relating to how you take this forward. You mentioned, organisation size. I'm interested in some of the other challenges you had.
It was if I reflect back on it, so we created to our product, if you like, our solution, to everything that we identified was to create some kind of platform, some way of deploying and making learning available to our team members, and hang on.
Yeah, okay then.
Hang on the screen. Yeah. Sorry, lost my train of thought then.
Sorry, my desktop's gone all over the place.
Yeah, that's it. I was thinking all of a sudden I'm sharing my screen.
It's my screen.
So
let's put it back again.
So yes,
there we
sorry.
go. Right. Sorry, apologies, my bad.
No, that's okay. But was to create a platform to deploy what we wanted to do in terms of accessing our team members. So the challenges that we had, first and foremost for me, was to sell it into the organization, sell it into the senior leadership team. Now, I'd say again on reflection, that was a fairly easy sell in. And again, that was very fortunate for me. Bearing in mind my starting point was kind of ground upwards. So anything that I kind of brought to the table and said, look, this is the issue, this is the challenge, this is what we're looking to create. And bearing in mind, it's that whole entrepreneurial spirit, which is, well, that's your idea, go away, do it. And that's exactly what we did. So getting funding, that was relatively simple. Did we get the funding that we needed? Not massively, no. But we got enough to create the platform. Now, in terms of budget, I have a very low budget in the learning and talent space. There's blessing and curse that comes along with that, because obviously we don't have a big pot of cash that we can go out and spend on flashy vendors and bringing in and doing it X, Y, Z. We have to be very prudent. But for us as a team, it really forces us to think of different innovative ways, be more creative in terms of engaging our people, in terms of curating, creating content, so on and so forth. So when I think back, this is going back to April 2019, getting the sign off, that was fine. Getting the leadership buy-in, that was relatively simple. However, challenge that soon presented thereafter, and if I'm completely honest, continues, which is maintaining that senior level, that senior leadership interest, but also support. And I think irrespective of the organization that you've worked for or work in, I know from my background, having a sponsor, a senior leader sponsor with whatever you do is critical. So, I really do cite that as an immediate challenge once we got the sign off, and maintaining that. It is an ongoing battle, but it really does make certainly myself and for my broader team, of which there are 3 of us, think about things differently. Constantly review our stakeholders and work that.
I was going to say, so I'm really interested. So what do you do to keep your senior team, the senior stakeholders engaged and wanting to sponsor it? How do you keep them interested so that they can, so that you've got their constant support?
Yeah. I think any organization, you're always going to get those 1 or 2 people that kind of get it. You know, for me at Greystar, you know, we've got one or two key senior stakeholders that are fully invested. And for the broader population, that's not to, you know, pull those people out and, you know, treat them, you know, any differently, although we do to an extent. It was around frequency of communication. It was when we were going back to, you know, you mentioned earlier around the build and the purpose and the creation stage. I had in my mind what I wanted to create, but actually I socialized that. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but, you know, spending so much time working around those stakeholders in our different locations. But at each stage of the build, what we were creating is just jumping on a call, you know, this is what we're thinking about for this part, you know, will this work for your part of the business? So kind of brought them along on the creative journey, if you like.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other, absolutely, it's about making sure that they understand what's going on, and that idea of socializing them so they can become familiar with the things that will happen, I think is really important. Yeah, so that they're not surprised when they start seeing things that are a little bit different, perhaps.
But it was those key conversations where they could start visualizing it, which is okay. You know, I now know what you're talking about. I can visualize what you're talking about. But also then making it relatable in terms of this is what it's going to do for your function. You know, this is the benefits for your team. So that maintaining that engagement at that level was regular updates all the way up to deployment, then running through, you know, this is our marketing comms plan, this is what's coming out to your people, so on and so forth. So being really transparent, you know, and trying to be 1-2 steps ahead of the game. And the other thing that was really important for myself and, you know, for the team is making it a seamless experience. You know, making it, you know, a really intuitive way of accessing learning. So again, you know, what am I talking about here? We launched a learning platform, you know, with the help of with 5apps platform, and using Hemsey Fraser as our initial content provider. And I think that's also worth noting that when we launched the platform across our European platform, we launched with about 900 pieces of learning. Very generic, but very good pieces of learning. As we sit here now, we've got over 4,193. What the differentiator was for us was creating our own little brand within a brand. So we branded our platform as the Greystar Business School. And we created a brand within that, which is the Greystar Originals. So for those that are familiar with the platform, with the hub, it has a look and a feel, aesthetic similar to Netflix Originals. So it wasn't a huge jump for us to pinch the branding, and that helped with the stakeholder engagement. Because you could suddenly demonstrate to the business, this isn't just a generic, you know, piece of learning, or it's a generic platform for all. This is something that we're going to really tailor and make bespoke to your populations. Yeah,
cool. Apologies, everybody, if you can hear my washing machine going off in the background. I do apologise. The spin cycle was started. We do this stuff from home now, so there we go. So apologies if that's coming through. I do. It's also because I've got a good microphone, so there we go. So in terms of the delivery itself, were there any particular challenges? I mean, you talked about the stakeholder engagement and so on, and you talked about the branding. Were there any particular challenges in that delivery in the first instance?
Delivery went great. And there was a number of reasons why that was. I mean, we tested. And, you know, my view was that if we're going to launch it, it's got to work straight off the bat. And, you know, the technical guys at 5app were brilliant. You know, we had some good technical expertise within the team. And we launched it with a bit of pomp and circumstance. You know, we had some town halls to support. You know, the various countries did their own little in-country launch. You know, there was cakes and all that kind of great stuff. So from an initial delivery perspective, it was great. And engagement, went through the roof, because of course we got a shiny new toy that people, want to go and play with. It was something new for the organization. And at that point you sit back and say, well, great, job done. Reality, the job only just started. How naive.
I think that's a really good point, and that's a really valid point. Is we plan to the event of the thing starting and go, done, but it's exactly not that. And you're so right that no, we've done to that point. That's the first 20% of it. There's another 80%. It's the Pareto principle. We've done the 20. The next 80 is all of the other ongoing work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very easy for me to talk about our journey, and talk about what was created, and and outside looking in thinking, well, that all went very, very simply for you, Steve. Actually, the amount of learning that we've undertaken, that I've undertaken going through that, and things that we do differently, it is significant. And we don't get everything right. We've got a point here, which is what was a light bulb moment? Well, there was a reason why we had to have a light bulb moment. So it's not a case that we've nailed it, because we really haven't. We've made a good, massive leap forward in terms of providing a learning platform and a learning experience for our team members. But, it's a fast-paced world we live in. We've got to change, we've got to innovate. So, we're part way along that continual journey, I'd say.
Yeah. The question light bulb moment is, was there any? Did you have anything that stood out? And yeah, I think from a delivery perspective, this is why I put when I wrote about this, I don't get the opportunity to see the delivery stuff potentially as much. So for me, there is an element. Is there a point where you go, oh, we could do this, or oh, we could do that? Does that ever happen?
Well, as in, the different ideas,
yeah,
or do,
yeah,
massively, yeah, 100%. And the light bulb moment for us. So going back to that initial delivery, and it was like sitting back, engagement's gone through the roof. It's exceeding expectations, and it's like great. And then over there, and I'd say that high lasted for about 4 to 5 weeks. Okay, so that was pretty good, launching a new platform. But then ever so slightly and gradually, but then immediately, it just fell off a cliff. No one was logging in. We had no footfall, and it was an off-the-cuff meeting with the guys who we partner with at Hemsley Fraser. Kind of sat around the table thinking, there's got to be a reason for this. And yeah, long story short, I think I'd come into this with a little bit of bias, maybe my background, which is when you create a learning platform, it's like a corporate learning university, if you like. We're going to have some real corporate content in there, and we're going to have the right number of courses that we're going to, so on and so forth. Well, people have gone in and they looked around thinking, okay, that's all they've got to offer. So the light bulb moment was, well, why don't you use it more from an engagement perspective? Yeah. And that really resonated with me. Greystar as an organization to work in, we're very much around relationships. It's that social learning environment, I guess, is a good way to describe it. So making that connection, which is, let's bring the engagement piece into it. What was the start of the light bulb moment? And it was at the point where, ironically, Boris was just moving into office. And we used that as an example, and, or as a pilot, as a test, if you like, which is we took a piece of news. So Boris going through this change, moving into number 10, we had like a BBC video snippet that we put into a playlist of content. But what we did, we then supplemented that. We supported that initial real life news with relevant content. So managing change, managers in transition, dealing with ambiguity, so on and so forth. So we took a worldwide, piece of news, issue, challenge that was going on, and then we leveraged our content and then push that out. And then what we saw is we had people clicking, and they were obviously clicking that little snippet, but then they were starting to explore the supplementary learning. And then what we found over time, people were spending more time exploring, picking out, you know, relevant content for them. And that stuck with us, and we maintained it. And that brought us, you know, quite close on the run up now, as we look back in, you know, the COVID pandemic. So it kind of set us up, if you like.
I was going to say, because if you launched end of 2019, and then obviously beginning of 2020, we then ended up with the pandemic. So how was the fact you had the platform there, how did that feel, or what happened as a result of that? Did you get better engagement, do you think, or how did you manage through that?
It was I guess a moment in time. You know, obviously no one saw it coming, you know, at the pace that it did, you know, and organizations rapidly deploying their people to work from home. It worked in our favor, as, you know, maybe bizarre that is to say, but put that in context, you know, of where we are from a learning maturity perspective. You know, we had no real face-to-face course curricula to unwind. You know, people weren't typically used to going to face-to-face courses, and, you know, we then stopped delivering it. But, you know, where we'd had this light bulb moment, which is let's take real wide issues and, you know, support that with the applicable learning, really played to our strength, because we suddenly had this live portal that people could access on desktop, on their mobile, and this kind of thing. And we set up a live news feed, you know, with all the news coming in through. So we had like a COVID news feed, but then we had various content that we were pushing out, and the topics were you know, vast and broad. You know, working at home with kids, how to keep the kids occupied, you know, during the day. You know, recipe ideas. You know, we're suddenly at home. You know, all this kind of content was so far removed from a build-to-rent organization. You know, we're now engaging. We're engaging our population. It's a point of need. So again, going back to our purpose, you know, creating the right content for the right people at the right time. Yeah. And the engagement just snowballed from there. You know, we were interweaving with our Greystar original content, so we're strengthening that brand. And we had you know, this live content coming through. You know, the beauty was that we could have you know, links to live news feeds, and, you know, if you were anything like us, you know, at 5 o'clock or whenever it was every day with the Prime Minister's update, you know, we were pushing it through the business school. That served a huge purpose for us, but also demonstrated, going back to our senior stakeholders, senior leaders, which is, okay, you've got a platform here that has multiple uses, multiple reaches, but can be as agile as you need it to be. So that was our little light bulb moment.
Awesome. And you were doing that across UK only, or was that across Europe, or across globally, or?
At that point, that was across Europe. So UK and our European countries, that presented an additional challenge, which, you know, I go back to my point, which is it's very easy to look at this thing like that how simple. No, there's been so many things that we've had to learn and pivot to, you know, as we've gone through, which is particularly around the pandemic, which is very easy to lean into, you know, English news feeds. Well, what about Spain? You know, what about Germany? You know, so translation and local language really elevated its way up the priority list, which is, okay, we need to provide content in local language.
And how did you manage that? Was it successful?
Ongoing, I would say. For our Greystar original content, we were using a third party to translate, very time consuming, incredibly expensive. But then we found an amazing tool, which there's no reason why I can't share it. It's out there on the net. I'm sure other people are using it, but we use DeepL, which has a free version and also a paid version. But that allowed us to translate our content at pace, and that was a game changer for us. So there was that element, but then building on those relationships within country, finding our little learning champions, if you like, that could go away and curate content. And I think you've made the point previously around curation over creation. That's exactly what we were doing at that point, curating the right content.
And that feeds in totally with Duncan's point. I see Duncan's put in the chat the idea of thinking about the job of driving engagement around learning and making it contextual and relevant. And that this is a conversation I have all the time. You know, engagement doesn't equal learning, but at least it gives you that starting point in order to be able to do the learning stuff. That's the it at least gives you a starting point for learning, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you've got to have something. It's got to be relevant. You know, it's got to be compelling. So absolutely agree with that. Sorry, Andrew, I was just going to say, you know, sometimes I feel I'm more of a marketeer sometimes on some days than you know, marketing and selling our wares. And I'll be interested to know whether other people in other organisations sometimes feel like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've just developed a way of doing evaluation. It's built on something called the Barcelona principles, and the Barcelona principles themselves come from marketing, and they're actually elements around measurement built into the engagement of people with marketing products and so on. So
right,
yeah, so they are. We talk about marketing learning, but we don't think about, well, actually, how do you measure it and the effectiveness?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I've actually built some evaluation stuff around it. So.
Well, I'd be interested to see that for sure.
We'll have to sort out another chat another time. I've got a question in there about iterate in an agile fashion. So I'm assuming you had to move stuff quickly.
Yeah, at pace was incredible. You know, and all credit to the team. You know, then and also now. You know, anything that we created wouldn't have been created without them. So I myself feel, you know, very blessed with the skills and the dedication that the learning team you know, bring to the table. But where that really came to light was that sense of ownership. You know, every one of us in the team just owned it. You know, of an evening, you come back in the morning, we jump on a call, and it's kind of like, I've seen this piece of learning, we should pull this together in a, you know, playlist. So the ability to upload and push content out, you know, within minutes was amazing for us. Yeah. You know, because again, it's that engagement piece, and you know, going back to our senior leadership team, you know, we constantly demonstrating, you know, we can push this stuff out. And a lot of things fell out the back end of that, which is actually, well, I could put my functional update out on this, and you know, everybody can, yeah, absolutely. So it started at that point growing arms and legs in terms of its usability. So really compounding this this view and approach around being an engagement as well as a learning platform.
And that's a really interesting point, because I think that's partly to do with the learning culture piece. And I hear people about want to design learning culture and stuff like that. Well, actually, it's probably not learning culture stuff that you need to build. What you need to build is comms, engagement, process,
right,
systems,
right,
business performance, culture, and the learning culture will then come from that. But what you were doing is, by using the platform to do that, you start creating a different kind of learning culture.
Right. Right, and because it was such a new platform, new approach, and you know, a big thing for me was, it would be great, going back to this whole view of YouTube, is start building people's competence and capability of doing their own little piece to camera, you know, their own update. A lot of hesitation and resistance to that for obvious reasons. So you know, we kind of took it by the scruff of the neck. So we were providing learning and development updates. You know, this is everything that we're working on. This is what's coming out. So we were really demonstrating to those functional leaders, actually, it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be polished. Just push something out, because, you know, our video content, you know, gets consumed so quickly. And I think that's the other learn that we've taken away, you know, from going through this experience, is learning so much more about how our organization learns, you know, our demographic, you know, what it likes and what it doesn't like to learn, how it likes to learn.
Yeah.
And without having gone through the experience, I don't think we'd be as informed as we are now.
So I'm going to feed that into the sort of like the last part to do with the achievements and the end results and so on. So what have you learned from doing it, and what have the results been?
Never do it again. What have we learned? So many things. I think it's hard to, you know, wrap that up into, you know, a bullet point. We've learned how to really engage our stakeholders, how to really market to our organization. And, you know, I'm always very mindful to say, you know, what we've done, how we've done it works for us. There may be some crossover, some elements that will work in other locations, but you know, we had a lot of circumstances that played to our strengths. You know, the pandemic was one, the amazing growth and continued growth of the organization, rapid promotion. You know, I guess there's that phrase, isn't it? Where there's chaos, there's opportunity. You just jumped into the opportunity. You know, so that was a real learn from the experience, but also something that we maintain now. So we constantly challenge ourselves in the learning and talent space around innovation, you know, doing something different, exploring those different ideas, because you know, and this isn't unique to Greystar by any stretch of the imagination, but we are constantly fighting for people's time, for people's space. We've recently run another organizational needs analysis, and one of the questions in there was around, you know, what prevents you from learning? Time and workload. So when you think around, you know, we push you know, marketing out, comms, updates, these kind of things, you know, 2-3 times a week, I think it is. But we're fighting for that space. So if we always do what we've always done, we always get what we've always got, type of thing. So we've constantly got to be doing something different to make people think, okay, well, what's going on in that space? Or that looks interesting. And it's got to be relevant. You know, it's, I think, very easy to push content out for content's sake, but we're very, very mindful and very thoughtful around who we push content to and what that content is. So that's been a big learn for us as well. Yeah. If that helps. I can't hear anything. I don't know whether anybody can still hear me. I'm happy to carry on talking.
We can. My apologies. I put myself on. My son was walking about getting his lunch ready, and so I put myself on mute, as is always the way, and I forgot to unmute myself. Going back to what you said before, Steve, about necessity effectively being the mother of invention and having little budget, there is a way to have that conversation with the business in a different way, and it can help the design piece. So I worked in an organization where, again, very little money. But what we worked out was that the spend on learning in total, so the actual capital spend or direct spend, equated to about 2.5% of the employee salary budget. So we converted that into time and said, well, if people are due to work a 35-hour week, which it was at the time, it was 2.5% of a 35-hour week is 52 minutes. So what we did was we built everything to a 52-minute budget and says, you've got 52 minutes a week, and we will put activities in there that would be 26 minutes or 13 minutes or 6 or 7 minutes. And what you do is you build a budget up that you're entitled to your 52 minutes a week. And what that means is it just changes the conversation and allows people the space to spend some time learning something.
I think it's great. And it's those different approaches helping the business, look at these things in slightly different ways. It's critical because you're right. We're fighting for time. We're fighting for people's brain space, but also we are fighting for budget. And we've got to demonstrate that actually that there's value. So I like that. I'm going to pinch that.
Feel free. Feel free. Still with pride. No problem with that. It's really funny when you start working the numbers out. So 3% of a 35-hour week is about 60 minutes. So most organizations spend, generally it's between 3 and 6%. Some are spending 6% on direct learning activity. Well, that's 2 hours a week for most people. So do employees get 2 hours a week? We talk about what the average spend is per employee, but talk about it in terms of time. Do you get 2 hours a week to learn something? I think that's a totally different kind of challenge. And what it does, it forces the learning function to design differently, because you can't do a 3-hour session here or 1-hour session there or whatever.
Yeah. We just don't have the space for that. That's why mention our branded learning, which is content we create by us for us, and that comes in on average about 5 minutes per video. It could be a huge topic, but we just chop it up so it's that right time, right person, right place type thing. But exactly. Time is always going to be a challenge.
And time is a challenge to us now. We're coming to the end of our time here as well, unfortunately. I've just seen how long we've been on. We're almost 50 minutes in. So, we're running along. Just checking for any questions from the audience. I don't see we've got any questions in there at the moment. Is there any final thoughts, Steve, that you would like to put forward? Any other standout stuff that we haven't spoken about?
I think the only thing that I'd encourage people to think about, if they're looking to do something like this, and be very clear around going back to that purpose piece. I'm very conscious. I wanted to create a vision and some supporting strap lines, if you like, that supported that. I've mentioned a couple of them. Right learning, right person, right time, all this kind of thing. But then setting down the challenge, which is, well, they can't just be these corporate strap lines. They've got to mean something. So being very clear around what that learning experience needs to be, and have those incredibly high standards. I don't know, for us, if we're pushing content out, the artwork needs to be right. It needs to be sharp. It can't be pixelated, and that may sound really pedantic, but actually for an end user experience, it makes a huge difference. So I
can't agree with you more.
Yeah,
I was looking at stuff around audio recently, and the if you've got better audio, people will trust you, even though you might be talking rubbish. It comes down to the quality of how that information is available to people. So yeah, I agree 100%. Sorry, Steve. It's
yeah, no. And it is so important. I absolutely agree with that. In terms of the voice quality, but but within with our team, got James, who is incredible in the learning tech and the creation space, and he's an absolute stickler. But it's also then looking at it. We talk about time and cost, all this kind of thing. What's the kind of learning that, if it's 80% there, we can push it out, and what's the stuff that's got to be absolutely 100%? So within that 80%, there's a number of non-negotiables, if you like, but it's got to be deployed rapidly. And then we've got the more formal stuff that is completely polished. So recognizing what's your 80%, flight it out the door, what's your 100% needs to be done, but what are your standards? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be remembered for?
Awesome stuff. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. I really
My
appreciate it.
absolute pleasure.
No, a really, really useful conversation. We are recording it, like I said, and we are going to take the audio out, and we'll use some of the audio for a podcast as well. Um, just leaves me to say thank you to everybody who's attended. Thank you, Steve, for really, really useful content, and thank you to everybody for attending. And really do appreciate everybody who has connected with us today. If you want any further information, then please do contact the team from 5app, and you can email them hello@5app.com, and you'll receive their information also in the follow-up. There is a very short survey we'd ask you to complete when you finish the session, just so we can get your feedback and thoughts. Again, once again, thank you, Steve. Really do appreciate it. And for
Thank
your
you.
time.